Hello everyone, my name is Therese and I'm back with another video on how to engineer ISO 27001 controls and eventually map them to other frameworks like NIST. So this is a follow-up video on a post I made on LinkedIn. I'm going to put a link to the post in the description below. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Mhm. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen now. So this is a project I worked on for a small organization. They are a cloud-first organization and they have no SOC available. There are other details I cannot share here, but these are the bits I can share for now. So in engineering and control, we are looking at the best practices for the organization based on their current state. So you should keep in mind that, like I said, there's no SOC available. So you would see how that will influence some of our decisions as we go on. So I'm not going to talk a lot or lengthy. I'm just going to focus on the first control so that you have a better understanding when you are engineering a control for your organization, like I did for this organization during this project. So the first one, we are going to look at logical access management. Why logical access management? Because, like I said, it's a cloud-first organization. It's okay. So most of their activities are on the cloud, and in terms of access, we'll be looking at the logical access because we have physical and logical access. And since most of their stuff on the cloud, it'll be better to go in the direction of logical access management. So as you can see, when you take the ISO Annex A controls, the ID for access management is A15, A515. So as you can see under the ID, we have A515, and then the control name is logical access management. It's okay. So for the control intent, here you take what the control stands to achieve, and then you modify it to suit the organization that you are working for. So for the organization I was working for, that I happened to do this project for, this is how I framed the intent. So to ensure that, so the control intent, that's the logical access management intent, is to ensure that only authorized individuals have appropriate logical access to cloud environment applications data in line with their role and business need. So here we are going to talk about list privilege, role-based access, and all that. So we'll move on to the administrative controls. So with administrative controls, here we are looking at best practices administrative wise to see the structure of the organization. Is okay. So usually before this, you get to scope the organization, get to know what they are dealing with, have a fair idea of what it means to be the organization, what makes up the organization. So based on that, you'll be able to suggest good administrative controls to help achieve the control intent. So the first one is documented access management policy defining rules, approval requirements, and least privilege principles, like I said before. And then the second one is defined process for granting and approving privileged access. The third one is periodic access reviews covering employees and contractors with documented outcomes. So if we are to have these administrative controls in place, then automatically we'll be achieving the control intent. Is that okay? And automatically we'll have that the control, which is the logical access manage a good logical access management in place if these administrative controls are in place. Is that okay? And then when we move on to technical controls, we have cloud identity and access management enforcing role-based access. Exactly. So it's not just about documenting the process as to who has access to what, how to grant accesses and all that. That's for the administrative side. But move on to the technical side, we need to have a system in place that will help to enforce the administrative controls. So that'll be the technical controls to help the administrative controls be enforced. And then under our technical controls, we have multi-factor authentication for access to cloud consoles and sensitive applications. So once again, accesses are being protected. It's not just password, username, but we are taking it a step further to ensure that indeed the authorized users are the ones accessing resources on the cloud platform. The third one will be centralized login of authentication and authorization events. Login helps to ensure that yes, indeed, those who have been granted accesses are the ones using it. And in any case where an access was not granted due to wrong username or wrong password, notice can be taken of that, and then the right action can be taken to ensure that it's not a breach that's happening. It's not an account breach that's happening. Even if it's an account breach that's happening, it could be addressed before it causes any more harm. So a compensating control is when the administrative and technical controls are not in place or they fail to function. So you have to ask yourself, the organization you're working for, I mean, you've recommended administrative controls based on their environment. You've recommended technical controls based on their environment. Now you also need to recommend controls in case the administrative and technical controls fail or do not work. So in my case, manual access and log reviews performed when automated enforcement or review carriage is incomplete is a compensating control. So I see under the technical control, we have a system that's enforcing the role-based access, and we also have a centralized login of authentication and authorization event. It's okay. So in case these technical controls fail, it's okay. Then we'll have to manually review the logs, manually review accesses to ensure that no one other than the authorized users are having access to what they're supposed to have access to. Thereby, we are enforcing the least privilege principles we talked about in administrative control. So you see how all of them are linked. They always come back to each other. Nothing is done in isolation. And in terms of gathering evidence, so in case you want to be certified and you want to gather evidence to prove to an auditor that indeed you have a very good logical access management in place, what are some of the evidences we could collect towards that? Or what are some of the evidences we can collect as an organization to ensure that we are doing the needful? So one of the, for this organization, what the evidences are approved access management policy, as we discussed in the administrative control. So it's not just about saying about having the documents in place. To onboarding, offboarding records showing access provisioning and revocation. Like you said in the administrative control, we have defined process for granting and approving privileged accesses. So we should have evidence of records where we are onboarding people to have privileged access, and we also have records of offboarding people when we no longer want them to have a privileged access to a particular cloud resource. And then the third one will be identity and access manual configuration records and access logs is okay to help buttress the first point of the technical control, which is cloud identity and access management, enforcing role-based access. And then the third one would be configure IAM. IAM here means identity and access manager. Okay. And then the fourth one will be access review reports with documented approvals and removals. Is that okay? So these are evidences we can collect to show that indeed we have administrative and technical controls to ensure logical access management system is in place. And usually a control owner here. So the reason why the control owner is security and IT management, because according in the organization, the only technical person or the only IT manager was a security manager. So, like I said, you need to know the organization you're working for. You cannot just allocate a control owner when that position does not exist in the organization. So the control owner could have been anyone here, maybe a stock analyst or anything, but they do not have a stock in place, like I said before. So it would be best to give it to someone that exists and is in close proximity to that, and that'll be the security and IT manager. And this control, the logical access management control type, is a preventive one because why? Because we are looking to prevent unauthorized access. Is that okay? We're also looking to prevent any sort of risk that would emanate as a result of unauthorized people accessing sensitive data, cloud resources they are not supposed to access. Does that make sense? So for this first control, this is how you engineer a control. Okay, you break it down into intent, you break it down to administrative controls, you break it down to technical controls and compensating controls, and then you help the organization implement these controls, and then you help the organization also gather evidence towards any certification or any um, activities thereafter. Is that okay? So we have engineered the A550, which is the access management control. How then do we map this control to other frameworks? So I was able to map it to NIST, CSF, and RMF, and let's see how that went. So the next tab, as you can see, the first one is a A515 Annex A control. And then, like I said, the control name is the logical access management. Now we are mapping it to NIST 853, the RMF, and then we also map it to the CSF. Is that okay? So before anything else, you need to know the CSF functions, and then also the CSF category. The categories are a lot, but you should have the function at the back of your mind. Yeah, it should be something you should know. And then the next 853 out yeah, there are also a lot, but um as you move on and you come across these day in day out, some of them will be you'll be used to some of them, they'll not be so new to you. So for the first one, the control here is logical access management. That's when it comes to ISO 27001. But when we are mapping it to NIST 853, we can map it to account we can map it to certain things. Is that okay? So we have AC17. Is that okay? And then we have AC2, which is account management PIN. You can see AC17, which is access control 17, which talks about remote access. Like I said, it's a cloud first based organization. So remote access is logical here. And then we have access control 2, which is account management, and then access control 3, which is access enforcement. So all these are subcategories of the NIST 853 access control um, category. Is that okay? Right. And then we can also map the logical access management control to identity and authentication, which is IA2, which is IA. And then under that, we have the IA2, which is identification authentication. And we also have access control 6, which is least privilege, as we talked about in the administrative um, control. Okay, so that's for the next 853 when we are mapping that. Is that okay? So under the next 853 control family, we have AT and IA, which can be mapped to the logical access of the ISO 27001 control. Is that okay? So the AC here is access control family of the NIST 853, and the IA here is the identity and authentication control family of NIST 853. Is that okay? And then under those under that family of access control, we have some like IDs or some categories. Is that okay? So when you see AC2 or AC6, like I've put them in brackets. So AC17, like I said, is remote access. That means the subcategory of 17 under access under the control family access control is remote access. Is okay. And then the ISO 27001 8.5.15 talks about logical access management. And you're looking at a cloud-based organization. So remote access is definitely a must here. And then, like I said, for accounts management, because we're looking at access management and how do people access resources is using an account by creating an account. So, okay, so account management is also needed here. And then also access enforcement. I mean, we're looking at not just anyone accessing anything, but the right people accessing the right things. So here, access enforcement is okay. And then AC6, which is a least privilege access control, ID control ID6, which falls under, which talks about least privilege. It's also needed because we talked about that in the administrative control. And you can also map it to IA, which is identity and authentication under the NIST 853 control family, what talks about identification and authentication. So in logical access management, we have to identify and authenticate every user before they're able to access things, because we don't need unauthorized people accessing things they're not supposed to access. So moving on to the next CSF function, we have protect. So the functions are a lot. We have protect, govern, detect, identify, respond, and recover. So like I said before, in the other tab, we said logical access here is a preventive control type. And it's no wonder that we are choosing protect as a CSF function here, because we are looking to protect our resources, our critical data and information from unauthorized access. And looking at the options here, protect is our best choice over here. And then under the CSF category, there are quite a number, but under the CSF category, every CSF function, okay, has specific categories. Is okay. So the categories are a lot, but when you take a function by function, they are a bit manageable. Does that make sense? Yeah, so they are a bit manageable. So under protect, we have the CSF category of PRAA, which is identity management, authentication, and access control. So that will be the option we are going to go with, the identity management, authentication, access control. Why? When you look back at everything that we've talked about, everything basically is about identity, access, and authentication. So as we need to identify the user, authenticate that the user is an authorized user, and then eventually grant them access to a resource based on their role, based on their privilege access and all that. So choosing the identity management, authentication, and access control will be the best category to map this to under the CSF category. And then for the CSF function, we'll go with protect, because we are protecting our resources from unauthorized access. For NIST 853, we are going to go with the access control and identity and authentication control family. Is that okay? And then that's what we are going to map back to ISO 27001 control of logical access and management. So that's how you engineer a control, and also 27001 control, and then you map it to a framework. So essentially, we are saying that if we are able to implement these controls I talked about earlier on, if we're able to implement them properly and efficiently, then we'll also be meeting the demands of the access control family and identity and authentication. Sorry, identity and authentication control family of NIST 853. Will also be meeting the protect function, the CSF, and also be meeting the identity management authentication access control CSF category of NIST, of the protect CSF function of NIST. I hope this makes sense and this helps you better understand what it means to engineer control and eventually map it to other frameworks. Thank you very much for your time, and then I'll be making more videos as to how to making things easier when it comes to GRS and explaining how best we can go about certain things together. Thank you very much for your time.